The truth hurts. I found out I was never their real daughter. Reddit family drama stories. In today's video, we dive into some gripping Reddit family drama stories that will leave you questioning the true dynamics of family loyalty and the secrets people keep. From shocking betrayals to unexpected twists, these stories are sure to captivate you. If you enjoy intense and emotional Reddit family drama stories, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Silent Wars for more heart-pounding content. Let's get started. On a cold Wednesday afternoon, Sarah sat at her desk, finishing up a stack of reports that had been piled up throughout the week. As the clock ticked toward the late afternoon, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from her mother. Sarah was used to receiving texts from her, but this one felt different. The message was short and to the point. Yet the words, "Dinner at Marcello's, 7 p.m. We have big news," stood out in a way that sent a chill down Sarah's spine. The tone was casual, but the word big was the kind of detail that couldn't be overlooked. It wasn't just about the dinner location or the time, it was something about the way it was phrased. Her mind immediately began to race, wondering what could be the big news. For the past few years, the relationship between Sarah and her family had been strained. Her visits home had become less frequent, the conversations shorter, and her role in the family had shifted. Once, Sarah had been the one to gather the family together, organizing everything from holidays to birthday dinners. But recently, her younger sister Emily had taken over that role. Emily was the golden child, the one who always seemed to do everything right. Sarah, on the other hand, had grown distant. Her job in the city kept her busy, and the physical distance between her and her family felt like a metaphor for the emotional distance that had built up over the years. Despite the growing distance, Sarah felt an inexplicable pull to attend the dinner. After all, it was family. She'd been part of it for her entire life, and no matter how much time had passed, there was always a part of her that still cared. She quickly glanced at her watch and noticed the time. It was already 5:30 p.m., and she had just enough time to grab a quick shower and head out. As she stepped out of her office building, the cold evening air hit her face, a reminder of how long it had been since she'd truly connected with her family. Pulling into the parking lot of Marcello's, a cozy Italian restaurant tucked away on a quiet street, Sarah felt a knot tighten in her stomach. The place had always been special to their family, a spot where they had celebrated countless birthdays and anniversaries. As she entered the restaurant, the familiar smells of garlic and fresh bread filled her senses. But there was something else, something that didn't quite feel right. Sarah walked past the host, who led her to the private dining room at the back. As she stepped inside, her heart sank. There they were. Her mom, looking radiant and as flawless as ever, seated at the head of the table. Her father, Gerald, with his arms crossed and a look of quiet approval. Emily, her sister, glowing as usual, basking in the attention of the room. Even her grandfather, Walter, was there, though he said nothing, just nodding quietly as the rest of them spoke. But what caught Sarah's attention, what made her freeze in her tracks, was the huge banner hanging above the table. "Congratulations to our real daughter," it read in glittery, bold letters. Sarah felt like she'd been slapped in the face. The shock hit her like a wave, but she couldn't quite process it. She was the one who had been excluded from the excitement. Everyone was already laughing, already settled in, as though nothing had changed. But Sarah could feel it, the coldness of being left out, the emptiness of realizing she wasn't part of their celebration anymore. The message on the banner wasn't just a greeting, it was a declaration that Sarah had always been a shadow in her own family. As her mom casually raised her glass to Emily and said, "To our real daughter," Sarah's heart dropped. It was in that moment Sarah realized how deep the divide had grown. This wasn't just a family dinner. It was a moment of truth, a moment that had been years in the making. She wasn't just the forgotten daughter. She was the one who didn't belong. Sarah pulled into the parking lot of Marcello's, her mind swirling with exhaustion from a long hospital shift. The cold evening air felt like a stark contrast to the warmth of the restaurant, and she paused for a moment before stepping out of the car. She glanced at her reflection in the rearview mirror and quickly adjusted her white coat, wishing she had had the chance to change into something a bit more fitting for the evening. But it didn't matter. She had always been the one to show up, even when she wasn't sure why she was invited in the first place. This time, maybe, just maybe, she'd finally be part of something. Something real. As Sarah walked through the doors of Marcello's, the familiar clink of glasses and chatter of voices surrounded her. The soft hum of conversations, the rustle of napkins, and the gentle clatter of silverware on plates created a cozy, welcoming atmosphere. It was the kind of place where families came to celebrate, where memories were made over plates of pasta and bottles of red wine. But as Sarah stood at the entrance for a moment, taking it all in, her heart began to race, and her stomach tightened with a feeling she couldn't shake. The room felt different, though. The laughter seemed louder than usual, the smiles a little too bright. She noticed how everyone seemed to be gathered around, their attention on one person, Emily, her younger sister, who was glowing with excitement. There was her father, Gerald, arms crossed in a way that said he was content with the evening, and her mother, Marlene, who always seemed to radiate warmth. But tonight, there was something cold behind her smile. Sarah was about to take another step forward when her eyes locked on the large banner hanging across the back wall. "Congratulations to our real daughter." The words blared in large, glittery letters. The banner felt like a slap in the face. Sarah's mind struggled to process what she was seeing. Was this some kind of joke? Her stomach churned and her breath caught in her throat. She had heard of family dynamics shifting, of favorites emerging, but this was something entirely different. The words on the banner weren't just an announcement, they were a declaration. A line drawn in glitter between who belonged and who didn't. Sarah stood frozen for a moment, her hand gripping the strap of her purse like a lifeline. She wasn't sure if she should walk forward or turn around and walk out the door. But before she could even make a decision, her mother's voice called out from the table, breaking the tension in the air. "Oh, good. You made it," Marlene said casually, as if nothing unusual had just occurred. "We've already started." Sarah forced a smile, her heart sinking into her stomach. She couldn't breathe, but she didn't let it show. The table looked at her with polite smiles, but no one seemed to notice the weight of the moment. No one apologized. No one even seemed to acknowledge the awkwardness, the sting of being left out, the feeling of not being enough. She quietly made her way to the edge of the table where a spare chair was placed. No one moved to make room for her. Sarah sat down, the chair creaking under her weight. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. She could hear the laughter around her, but it felt far away, like she was no longer part of the conversation. For the first time in a long while, Sarah didn't feel like she was part of anything at all. Sarah stood frozen, her heart pounding as she tried to process what she had just seen. The words on the banner echoed in her mind. "Congratulations to our real daughter." She had come to Marcello's, expecting some family news, perhaps something that would finally include her, make her feel seen, but instead, the sight of the banner hit her like a punch to the stomach. She felt as if she were suffocating, drowning in a room full of people who, for the first time, seemed to treat her like a stranger. The silence in the room seemed to stretch on forever as Sarah stood there, unsure of what to do. Her mother, ever the picture of composure, raised her glass with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, good. You made it," Marlene said casually, as if nothing were amiss. "We've already started." Her words cut through Sarah, hollow and indifferent. There was no apology. No sign that anyone recognized the sting of what Sarah had just walked into. It felt like a dream, except it wasn't. It was her reality. Sarah's body moved almost automatically as she walked toward the table. A chair was slid toward her from the edge of the dining room, a seat hastily added like an afterthought. No one made room for her, and no one seemed to care. She sat down quietly, trying to shrink into herself, hoping the smallness would make her invisible. But Lila, her younger sister, broke the silence with a proud smile that made Sarah's chest tighten. Lila's voice cut through the discomfort, the nonchalance in her tone almost too much to bear. "I did one of those DNA kits," Lila explained as if revealing a new toy. "Turns out, I'm the biological child after all. Mom and Dad thought they had me through surrogacy, but here I am." She giggled, as if it were some light-hearted joke. The words hung in the air, sharp and cold, cutting deeper than Sarah could have imagined. Lila seemed to glow with pride, basking in the attention of the family as they clinked glasses in celebration. Her announcement was casual, so matter-of-fact, as if it were a simple matter of fact. But for Sarah, it felt like a betrayal that no one could ever understand. Sarah's mind raced, but her body was still. The walls of the room seemed to close in on her, the laughter and congratulations echoing around her. But it all felt distant, like she was a ghost sitting at the table, waiting for someone, anyone, to recognize her pain. Yet, no one did. Her mother smiled softly, raising her glass to Lila in a quiet toast, while Sarah sat frozen, her heart breaking with each passing moment. The truth stung, and it was impossible to ignore. She wasn't the real daughter. She wasn't the one who had been wanted. All of these years, Sarah had lived in the shadow of her sister, never knowing the truth about her place in the family. And now, in the midst of this supposed celebration, the truth had been revealed in the most unexpected way, and it was too much to bear. The laughter that echoed around the table felt foreign to Sarah, as if she had walked into a room full of strangers. Her mother, once so attentive, was now absorbed in Lila's every word. Her father nodded along, his eyes filled with pride, as Lila continued to bask in the spotlight. The familiarity of the restaurant, the warm glow of the lights, and the clinking of glasses all seemed to mock her, making her feel more isolated than ever. It was as though she didn't belong in this space that had once been her home. Sarah tried to shrink into herself, to fade into the background, but it was impossible. The more she tried to disappear, the more she realized just how much she was being left out. It wasn't just the physical space around the table that felt suffocating. It was the emotional distance that had always existed between her and her family, now laid bare for everyone to see. Lila, with her glowing smile and captivating charm, was the center of it all, just as she always had been. Sarah couldn't help but feel like an afterthought, a mere spectator in a celebration that wasn't meant for her. And then, those words. The words that would forever etch themselves into her memory, real daughter. The phrase hit Sarah like a slap to the face. It wasn't just a casual comment, something to be brushed off. It was a label that would forever define the space she occupied in her family's life. Real daughter wasn't just a difference of biology. It was a symbol of everything Sarah had been excluded from. It was the recognition of all the things she had worked so hard for, all the love she had given, only to be told in the clearest terms possible that it had never been enough. The sting of those words lingered long after they were spoken. As Lila continued to laugh and share stories with the family, Sarah couldn't help but wonder if they had ever truly seen her at all. Did they even care? Did they know the sacrifices she had made? All those years of trying to be the perfect daughter, the one who took care of everything, always the responsible one, always the one who kept things together. Yet, despite all of her efforts, it was Lila, the one who had always been the family's golden child, who was now being celebrated as the real daughter. The weight of that label sat heavy on Sarah's chest. It wasn't just the word itself. It was the acknowledgement that she had never truly belonged in the way she had always imagined. It felt as if her identity, her place in the family, had always been conditional. And now, that condition had been made abundantly clear. It wasn't enough to simply love her family, to be there for them when they needed her. The truth was, Sarah had never been seen as the daughter they truly wanted. She had always been the second choice, the one who wasn't enough to be celebrated. As the evening wore on, Sarah sat silently, watching as her sister continued to take center stage. She tried to tell herself that it didn't matter, that she was better than the validation she had longed for, but the ache in her heart said otherwise. No matter how much she tried to tell herself she didn't care, the truth was undeniable. She felt like an outsider in her own family. And no matter how hard she tried, she would never escape that feeling. As the night dragged on, each moment felt more suffocating than the last. Sarah's attempts to push aside the sting of her family's cold indifference seemed futile. She had never felt more alone, sitting there in the middle of the room while her sister, Lila, gleamed with attention and pride. The label of real daughter hung in the air like a cloud, suffocating any hope Sarah had of feeling accepted. But just when she thought things couldn't get any worse, a waiter approached her with a sealed envelope, his eyes briefly meeting hers before he handed it over with a quiet, respectful gesture. The entire room fell silent. Every pair of eyes turned toward Sarah. For the first time that night, she was the center of attention, but it was a spotlight she never wanted. She could feel the weight of their gazes, curious, judgmental, and expectant. Her heart hammered in her chest, a mix of dread and disbelief rushing over her. What now? She wondered. What more could they possibly want from her? She hesitated for a moment, her fingers trembling slightly as she reached for the envelope. It was small, simple, but there was something about it that felt so heavy. No one spoke. The room waited. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she slowly slid her finger along the edge, tearing open the seal. Inside was a single sheet of thick, cream-colored paper, the kind that felt too elegant, too formal for the mess of emotions she was already drowning in. The handwriting inside was beautiful, sharp, deliberate cursive, as if each letter had been carefully constructed with purpose. She could already feel her stomach turning. Her mind raced with questions, her hands shaking as she unfolded the paper. She read the first few lines, and as the weight of the words began to sink in, it felt as though the floor had dropped out from under her. The letter began with a name, her biological mother's name, Camilla. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. It was the name of someone she had never known, never heard about. She blinked, trying to make sense of the words before her. The letter continued, revealing the shocking truth. Sarah's mother, Marlene, wasn't her biological parent after all. The woman who had raised her, the woman who had always been there, had never been the one who gave her life. It felt as if the letter had slapped her across the face. The room, still eerily silent, seemed to close in around her. The words blurred in front of her eyes, but she couldn't tear her gaze away from them. Her mind spun as she tried to process what she was reading. This revelation wasn't just about biology, it was about everything Sarah had known, everything she thought she understood about her family, about herself. Marlene had never been her real mother. She had raised her, yes, but Sarah wasn't her daughter in the way she had always assumed. It was a truth so devastating, so disorienting, that Sarah couldn't breathe. The room was still watching her. No one said a word, but Sarah could feel the eyes on her like a million tiny daggers. Lila's smirk faded, replaced by a look of confusion, and her parents' faces were unreadable. Sarah couldn't bring herself to look at them any longer. She felt sick. The truth had been right in front of her for so long, hidden beneath layers of well-meaning lies and half-truths. The love she had always craved, the place she had fought for, had always been conditional. Now, she was faced with the undeniable reality that her family her whole life had been a carefully constructed illusion. And the weight of it all, of the betrayal, the silence, and the rejection, crashed down on her. The family she had fought so hard to belong to had never truly been hers. As Sarah finished reading the letter aloud, the weight of the words hung heavy in the air. Her hands shook slightly as she lowered the letter, her eyes scanning the room full of familiar faces that suddenly felt like strangers. She couldn't understand how this revelation could be met with such a disturbing calm. Her mother, Marlene, sat across from her, still holding her wine glass like nothing had shifted, like nothing had changed. Her father, Gerald, who had always been the quiet observer, looked down at his plate, his expression unreadable, as if he were pretending not to notice the storm brewing at the table. There was no apology, no sorrow. They just sat there, as if Sarah had simply misunderstood something trivial. "Well, we took you in because we needed to," Marlene finally spoke, her voice even, almost detached. Sarah's heart stung at the words. They needed to? It wasn't because they loved her or because they wanted to give her a home. It had never been about her. Not really. It was all about what they needed. She swallowed hard, trying to keep the tears at bay, but it was impossible. Her whole life had been based on a lie, and now the truth was suffocating her, piece by piece. "You're still family, though," Marlene added, as if those few words could undo everything. As if those words could patch up the wounds that had been carved into Sarah's heart over the years. Sarah felt her chest tighten. Still family? Was that supposed to make it all okay? Her whole life, her entire existence, had been reduced to a statement so hollow it could have come from a stranger. Family wasn't just about blood. It was about love, support, and the unspoken bond that held everything together. But what Sarah had been given was none of that. Tessa, who had been quietly watching the exchange, now gave Sarah a pointed look. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, as though waiting for Sarah to accept this explanation, as if she were the one who should feel grateful for the crumbs they had thrown her way. But Sarah wasn't buying it. She wasn't going to sit there any longer and pretend that this twisted version of family was enough for her. The silence in the room felt deafening. Sarah could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, but it wasn't anger she was feeling, it was heartbreak. She had spent her whole life trying to fit into a space that had never been meant for her. She had tried to make herself small enough to blend into a family that had never truly accepted her. And now, as the truth finally came to light, she realized the extent of their denial. They didn't want her. Not in the way she had hoped. With a shaky breath, Sarah stood up, her legs unsteady beneath her. She could feel the eyes of her family on her, but this time, she didn't care. She had been searching for validation in the wrong place for too long. She wasn't going to beg for love that was never given freely. "Still family," her mother had said. But that was no longer enough. Not anymore. As the conversation swirled around her, Sarah sat frozen at the table, her mind racing, but her body rooted in place. The words her mother had said, the dismissive tone, the complete disregard for her feelings, echoed in her ears like a cruel chant. How could they think that was enough? How could they think that calling her still family would somehow erase the years of neglect, the years of being invisible in a home that was supposed to be a refuge? The more she thought about it, the more she realized how far gone she was from their version of family. Tessa, glowing as usual, had shifted the conversation back to herself, her pride in the news of her biological connection to the family so evident. Everyone was hanging on to her every word, applauding her discovery, but no one seemed to care about the person sitting at the table who had been ignored, minimized, and pushed aside her entire life. It was as if Sarah didn't matter, like she was just a prop in a family photo that no one cared to notice. And in that moment, everything clicked for Sarah. This was it. She wasn't going to sit here any longer. The decision, one that had been building for years, was suddenly clear as day. She was done pretending. She was done playing a role in a family that had never truly accepted her. The breaking point had arrived, and she had no intention of letting them drag her any further into their self-centered world. She stood up without a word, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. For a moment, the room went quiet. All eyes turned toward her, but she didn't look back. There was no need to explain herself, no need to justify her actions. They had made their choices long ago, and now, Sarah was making hers. Her heart pounded in her chest as she walked toward the door, her legs strong but her hands trembling. The air outside felt different, colder in a way, but somehow more refreshing. It was like she had stepped out of the suffocating confines of a life she didn't belong in, into something that felt like freedom. Freedom from years of neglect. Freedom from a family that never really saw her, no matter how hard she tried to be seen. She was tired. Tired of being the one who always showed up, even when no one else did. Tired of being the one who had to prove her worth over and over again. It was time to stop trying to earn a seat at a table that was never meant for her. As she stood outside the restaurant, she took a deep breath, letting the night air fill her lungs. It wasn't easy, this choice, but it was necessary. She wasn't walking away out of anger, she was walking away because she knew she deserved more. She deserved a family that valued her for who she was, not for what she could give or how much she could take. And if she had to walk away from the family she had been born into to find that, then so be it. No more pretending. This was the moment she took control. No longer would she let her worth be determined by their coldness, their distance, or their expectations. She was done waiting for them to change. She was done trying to fit herself into a space that wasn't built for her. She was Sarah, and that was more than enough. She wasn't going to let anyone, least of all her family, make her feel otherwise. With one final glance at the restaurant window, where her family continued to celebrate without her, Sarah walked away, stepping into the night with her head held high. Standing outside the restaurant, Sarah gripped the envelope from her biological mother with both hands. The weight of it felt almost surreal, like it carried the entire burden of her past. The cold air nipped at her skin, but it wasn't enough to numb the intense emotions surging through her. Every heartbeat seemed to echo in her chest as she read and reread the words written in her mother's handwriting. They were no longer just words on paper, they were the missing pieces to a puzzle she'd spent years trying to complete. Her true identity, the part of her life that had been kept hidden for so long, was finally being revealed. Her mind raced, but despite the overwhelming flood of thoughts and emotions, one thing stood clear. She had to find Grandpa Walter. He was the only person who had always been there for her, the only one who had seen through the cracks, the only one who knew the truth and had waited for the right moment to tell her. He had always understood her in a way that no one else had, and now it was time for him to finally share the full story. Without a second thought, Sarah started her car and drove through the dark streets. Each mile felt longer than the last, yet her heart was determined, driving her forward. The weight of her family's rejection was still fresh, but the promise of the truth, of knowing who she truly was, propelled her through the night. The further she drove, the more she could feel the tension in her body start to unravel. The deep breath she took in the car felt like a release. This was her journey now. No more pretending. No more being overlooked. This was about reclaiming her story. When she arrived at Grandpa Walter's house, she could already see the light from his porch. His figure was silhouetted against the soft glow as he stood by the swing, waiting. She could feel the comfort of the familiar as she walked up to the porch, her heart pounding with anticipation and fear. She had so many questions, but she already knew one thing. Grandpa Walter would be the one to help her put all the pieces together. The moment he saw her, he opened his arms, and Sarah rushed into his embrace without hesitation. It was a moment she had been waiting for her entire life, and in that warm, solid embrace, everything else seemed to fade away. His arms held her like the safe haven she had always craved, the comfort of unconditional love that she had never felt from the people who should have given it to her. Tears welled up in her eyes, the floodgates opening. Grandpa Walter was the only one who had always seen her for who she truly was. No pretenses, no conditions. He had been the keeper of the truth. And now, as she clung to him, she could feel that truth finally being handed to her. "I'm so sorry you had to find out this way," he said, his voice low but steady. Sarah pulled back slightly, wiping away her tears, and nodded. This was it. This was the moment she had been waiting for. Grandpa Walter had always been the person who believed in her, the person who had known who she really was, even when she didn't. And now, for the first time, she felt like she could breathe. As he led her inside, she knew this was just the beginning of her journey. A journey of healing, understanding, and, most importantly, discovering who she truly was. The truth was finally in her hands, and for the first time in years, Sarah felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The next morning, Sarah woke up with a sense of clarity she had never felt before. The weight of the previous night, the confrontation, the truth revealed, and the embrace of Grandpa Walter had finally started to settle into her soul. It was as if, in one night, everything had shifted. The pieces of her identity, scattered and broken for so long, were coming together. She had always wondered who she truly was, but now, with the truth in her hands, it was no longer a mystery. Sarah Cardenas was her name. That was the name that defined her, that connected her to the woman who had fought for her, loved her, and wanted her more than anything. It was time to claim it. She sat at her kitchen table, a cup of coffee in her hands, staring at the blank page before her. The decision had been made the moment she read the letter from her biological mother. She no longer needed to ask for permission to be herself. She had spent years trying to fit into a family that never saw her, trying to earn their approval, even though they never offered it. But now, she realized, approval wasn't something she needed to seek. Not from them. Not from anyone. With a deep breath, Sarah opened her laptop and began typing out the petition to legally change her name. Sarah Cardenas. It felt strange at first, unfamiliar even, but in a way that felt right. It was as if the name itself had been waiting for her to step into it, waiting for her to claim it as her own. The name that would carry her mother's legacy, her grandfather's support, and her own strength. No longer would she be tied to a past where she was invisible. No longer would she be Sarah, the second-best daughter, the one who never quite fit. She clicked the submit button, feeling a sense of finality wash over her. It was official now. She had taken control of her identity, her future, and her destiny. She was no longer defined by the family who had kept her in the shadows. She was Sarah Cardenas, and that was all that mattered. The following weeks were a whirlwind of paperwork, legal filings, and waiting. But throughout it all, Sarah felt a sense of empowerment that she had never known before. It wasn't just about changing her name on a piece of paper, it was about reclaiming her life. She started to make plans, set goals, and pursue the things that had always been on the back burner. She had spent so much time trying to fit into someone else's idea of who she should be. Now, for the first time, she was free to build the life she wanted on her own terms. In the days that followed, Sarah felt a lightness that came from shedding the weight of the past. The toxic relationships with her parents and her sister no longer had a hold on her. She stopped waiting for them to change, stopped trying to earn a place at their table. Instead, she built her own table, one where she could sit proudly as the woman she had always been meant to be. Her name was now a reflection of who she was and who she would continue to become. She was Sarah Cardenas, strong, resilient, and finally free to live life on her own terms. One of the most powerful lessons from Sarah's journey is the importance of embracing our true identity, regardless of the challenges we face or the people who fail to see our worth. As we age, we may sometimes feel overlooked or as though our lives have been defined by the expectations and opinions of others. However, Sarah's story teaches us that it's never too late to reclaim who we truly are. We are not bound by the labels others place on us, nor by the limitations they try to impose. True peace comes from accepting ourselves, honoring our own story, and living in alignment with our values, not seeking approval from those who have failed to recognize our worth. Life may present many difficult moments where we feel neglected or unappreciated, but it is in these moments that we find the strength to stand up for ourselves. Choosing to let go of toxic relationships and stepping into our authentic selves is a brave and necessary act of self-love. We must remember that our worth is not measured by the validation of others, but by the respect and love we give ourselves. As we move forward in life, it's important to create a space where we can thrive, surrounded by those who honor and support us for who we truly are. It's never too late to choose a life of self-respect, fulfillment, and peace. Thank you for watching today's video. We hope you enjoyed these intense Reddit family drama stories. If you found this video captivating, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Silent Wars so you won't miss any future videos. We appreciate your support, and we'll see you in the next one.